Hey there everybody and welcome. Today I am going to present a full tutorial and solo playthrough of Horseless Carriage. As you can see, I'm going to be using a program I wrote to play the game, and let me say right up front that most of the logic that went behind this solo variant that I'm going to be using today was created by BGG User TalkShelfingSpace, a really smart guy by the name of Alex. I don't know his last name. And I will point you to his design notes and posts regarding his solo variant in the show notes for this video. I have admittedly tinkered a little bit with his variant, and I've added a difficulty setting, but frankly, most of the credit for this variant has to go to him. I'm not going to go into detail as to how Alex's solo variant works, so if you're interested in the details of that, I encourage you to check out his design ideas in the link I provided. He admits it's not finished and that it's a work in progress, but rest assured, the fact that I've programmed most of his variant is indicative of my faith in it. Now, I'm not going to be going into detail regarding to the variant, but I will, however, be explaining the rules for the game itself as I proceed playing through round one. And then after round one, I may touch on the rules just to remind you, but I'll kind of play out the rest of the game from that point on. Using my program to teach and play games, as I always do in all my videos, that helps me ensure that I don't make any mistakes as I play the game. Now, granted, this may have been one of the more challenging games to program, so I can't fully guarantee a complete absence of bugs, but I've done my best and would encourage anyone watching this to point out any program mistakes according to the rules of the game, if and when they might occur, or if anything that I might say that's just plain out wrong. Please keep in mind that I write these programs for my own personal enjoyment, and I use them to teach and play games on my own. As you could tell from my channel, if you watch some of my other YouTube videos, you see that I always do this sort of thing. So please don't ask for a copy of this program because I never make them public due to copyright restrictions unless the publisher enters into a prior agreement with me. If you like what you see, please check out some of the other 60-plus board game videos I've made. As you can see, with this variant, I'm going to be playing a three-player game, but my program will be managing the play of my two opponents, who are green, I've named them Harrison, and purple, Ruby. I'm playing red, and technically speaking, before the game begins, actually, let me get things started here. Oh, I was going to pause, but what do you know, I'm first in turn order. That's fantastic. Great. Makes it far easier. Before the game begins, I have to place a research department and a planning department in my starting factory. Now, my starting factory is this black square here, and this is my starting research department. It has a rafter square, I think that's called, and a compass, and maybe some blueprints there in the background. That's a research department. There are actually 15 of them in the game, and when you're playing three players, and usually every player starts with one. However, in the solo variant, each of the dummy players or AI players start with two of these. So that's 2 times 2 is 4, plus my research department is 5, and that's why the quantity left of research departments is 10. Now, the game, in a three-player game, you start with 18 planning departments. That's this icon here with a clipboard on it. And you can see it's a little smaller than a research department. We each started with 1, so 18 minus 3 is 15, and that's why there are 15 of those remaining. Now, like I said, usually, if you go strictly by the rules, you take these 2 tiles, you place them in your factory, and then you lock it down. I personally don't like doing it that way, especially when I'm teaching this game, because it's easier to just teach it all at once when you get to phase 3. There are 7 rounds in this game, although usually the game only plays for 4, 5, or 6 rounds. You'll see that players can control how long it takes for the game to play out. So there are 8 phases, and building up your factory in each round happens in phase 3. So I'm going to leave the rules for what the tile placement rules for building up your factory are until we get to phase 3. But I'm also going to allow myself to move these tiles around. I don't like locking them down during setup because then once the game is underway and you get to round 1, phase 3, you might already find yourself in a box. So it's better to just play them all during phase 3 of round 1 and just make sure that those first 2 tiles are placed correctly. I think Edward of Heavy Cardboard agrees with me on this point, does the exact same thing, and we're all on board with that. In this game, we are industrialists at the dawn of the automobile, aka the horseless carriage, a time when cars were first invented, and no one really knew what this thing was going to look like, how it might behave, what features might be essential, what features would be worthless. Actually, to this day, there are features in cars that are coming and going. We're going to be building cars to sell to the public, all the while trying to figure out what it is about this newfangled invention that the public would like to see improved. Back in the early day of the automobile, they were very primitive inventions. Windshields came later. A horn came later. There might have been a steering wheel on one of the early cars, but it might have been used to control acceleration and control the engine and not to actually steer. Here's a crazy idea. How about adding brakes, too? You win the game by earning the most money selling cars, period. There's no fancy endgame scoring. There's no point salad. You just sell the most cars for the most money. You're going to be learning the game over the course of my playing round 1. And really, round 1 of this game is kind of a teaching round anyway. I do want to say that I am playing the basic version of the game. The rules strongly suggest that if you're a new player, play the basic version where you sell cars to the public. There is a normal version of the game that involves sports cars and trucks, but it does get much more complicated. And this is a somewhat complicated game to begin with, so it's better that you just sort of learn how the game functions with cars, and then you can throw in the other stuff later on. Let's start with an overview of what it is that you see before you. So like I said, this is my starting factory board, and I start with this research department and this planning department, but I'm going to have the freedom of moving them around when phase 3 comes around. To the right of my factory is the market board, this square board here. It looks like a checkerboard. It's 8 by 8. It's divided into 4 quadrants, each consisting of 16 squares. And you can see that there's an x-axis that's labeled 0, 1, 2, 3, and a y-axis labeled 0, 1, 2, 3 as well. You'll find that over time, the high end of the market, that is where people who want a lot of different features are going to be up here in the top right corner, and they are going to be willing to pay the most for a car, at most $6. People who just want a cheap vehicle, don't care about safety or don't care about anything else, will be in the bottom left corner, and they'll just buy for the cheapest possible price, which over time might be as little as $2. There are price tags that get assigned to these different gradients here. You see there's one here, another one here and here. And if all of these contain cars, then this part of the market would charge $6 a car. This would be $4 a car, $3 a car, and $2 a car. Now, when you start the game, there are a number of initial buyers. This is sort of like the early part where there's very few people own cars, very few people have the money to buy cars. They think this is just some strange thing that may not even catch on. So there's not that many people that really are interested in buying. So there's a neutral deck in the basic game of 6 cards that you draw a number of cards equal to the number of players plus 1. So we're playing a 3-player game, just so you can see the market board with some early buyers. Now, it's the early part of the automobile industry, so right now these people are willing to pay top dollar, $6, for a car that barely has any features in it. It will stop and go. That's pretty much what it's capable of doing. But as time goes on, more and more buyers will appear, and the prices will differentiate across those buyers as better cars and more prosperous buyers gravitate toward the top right, and the cheaper low-end buyers are going to stick to the bottom left corner. There are also 5 research tracks that are shuffled during setup and randomly dealt out, so that the first one here, which is red speed, turned out to be my x-axis. It's placed here along the bottom edge of the board. There's the second one that's drawn turns out to be my vertical axis. In my case, it's the range track. Now, normally this track is placed vertically aligned with the market board, but it's much easier to see it this way. There's a lot of different research tracks here, but remember, the ones that are surrounded by dark black lines are the ones that are currently in force. So speed is on the x-axis, range is on the y-axis. There are 3 other research tracks that are off-board. Normally, they're placed off to the side, but I have them all sort of shoved in here just to make the best use of space. Now, these are laid out top to bottom, and in my case, these were drawn randomly. Reliability, which is blue, is on top, followed by safety, which is yellow, and then design, purple, on the bottom. So these are currently off board, but over time, these tracks will get retired. These other research tracks will get retired and get substituted by one of these tracks from off board. Each player has a marker on each one of these research tracks. And notice that on the x-axis, the speed track, and the range axis, the y track, we start on the 1 space. As far as all the other off-board tracks are concerned, all the player markers are started on the 0 space. So that is one key thing to take note of. Effectively, this means that we each start with knowing how to build one particular car part. Each space of these research tracks contains a particular car part. Now, the whole library of car parts are over here on the far left side, and you can see that there are actually 4 different types. There are Type A parts, which have like a white background, and it's almost like you can't quite see it, but it's a large diamond-shaped hatch pattern in the background. There are 5 of these Type A parts, and they range from large tiles like the chassis to smaller tiles like the bumper. These lighter gray tiles that I think have a horizontal hatching are Type B. There's 5 of those. There are 3 Type C tiles that have a diagonal hatching. And there are 4 Type D parts, which have another diamond-shaped hatching, but it's much smaller. Now, you're not going to see it in my program, but for the most part in the program, you're going to be able to tell parts from one another based on the color. It's going to go from white to light gray to medium gray to dark gray, or almost black. So as I said, each one of these research tracks, all 6 spaces of each track contains a car part. Now, there are a lot of duplicates. Well, we currently have our markers on the first part of the speed track and the first car part on the range track. And coincidentally, because of the way these got drawn out randomly, that's the same car part. It's an engine, kind of an advanced engine. You can think of this engine as being one made for faster speed. And this engine is made so it breaks down less often and extends the range of the car. At the start of the game, we know how to build those parts. Now, normally, more often than not, you start with 2 different research tracks that happen to have 2 different parts, so we start the game knowing how to build 2 different parts, like this battery, for example, or these brakes down here on the safety track. But right now, we just know how to build engines. We're going to be advancing on these research tracks one step at a time. You'll see how all that happens, and each one of us can advance at different times on different tracks, depending upon what our desire, what it is we want to know how to build. Now, I was saying there are duplicates. There are actually three engines on the tracks. There's the one on range, the one on speed, and the one on, here it is, on reliability. That's a reliable engine. There are also other duplicates. Tires, for example, that extend the range of the car are on the green track. Tires that are safer and don't blow out as much are on the safety track. And tires that go faster or just have better tread are on the speed track. Other than that, there are still a handful of duplicates. You might see a couple steering wheels, a couple of this, a couple of that, but for the most part, most of these car parts are pretty unique. And they all trace back to one or more research tracks. Now, there are other tiles that can occupy space in your factory as well. We've already seen the research department and a planning department. Those are all up here. Each player starts the game with three different size dealerships. They are placed in your factory as well. That's a little bit of an abstraction, and obviously a dealership wouldn't be on a factory floor, but it works for purposes of this game design. Each player also starts with 4 marketing departments, all of the same size. I'll talk more about those. In a 3-player game, there are 6 car main lines. That's sort of the heart of the factory that manufactures the cars themselves. These car main lines, and each of my AI players have already taken one. That's why there are 4 remaining. And in phase 3 of round 1, I'll take one as well to start the game. So there will be 3 left over. Now, if we were playing the normal game, there would also be a truck main line, which is a little bit larger than the car main line, and a sports car main line, which is a little bit larger. Maybe not I think the sports car is larger than the car, and the truck is larger than the sports car. But that's for another day. There's also a time clock in the game that gets tracked and will count down over the course of the game. It starts at 24 for a 3-player game. And once it gets to 0, that's going to trigger the end of the game. I'll talk more about that later. By the way, you can see I have a rotate factory button. You can rotate your factory any which way you want. You could flip it. That's totally up to each individual player. Tiles can be flipped as well, as you'll soon see. But let me talk about the other parts of the board. There is a turn order track here. So I am first in engineering order, I should say. Green is second and purple is third. But when we're selling cars, the turn order is actually reversed. As you can see, sales happen in reverse turn order. So if the turn order doesn't change between now and when we start selling, which is in phase 5, purple's going to sell first, then green, then red, and then purple might get another shot, and then green and red, and so forth until nobody can sell any more cars that round. There's a minimum specifications box. It contains a box for each one of the research tracks: speed, design, reliability, safety, and range. I'm going to explain what the purpose of that minimum specification box is later, once you have a better handle of how the game works. I track each player's score over here. This number on the bottom is called the assembly capacity. It's how many cars each one of your main lines can manufacture. We start the game at the bottom of the track, all equal to 1. The track goes from 1 to 5, so you can't have an assembly capacity of more than 5. The Automa players, the AIs, will automatically increase their assembly capacity every round. So in round 2, they're going to be able to build 2 cars for every main line, then 3 cars for every main line. And by the time we get to round 5, if we get to round 5, they'll be building the maximum number of cars per main line, 5. Behind this message box, there's also what's referred to as a Gantt chart track. If you don't know what Gantt is, look up on Wikipedia. It's basically a planning and development tool. It was invented by Mr. Gantt, spelled Gantt. And the player who is last in turn order starts the game with one Gantt. So you can see that purple's on the number 1 spot. Then the next player up from purple, which is green, starts on the 2 spot, and then the starting player here is starting on the 3 spot. But this game plays with 3 to 5 players, so if you're playing with a full player count, the start player would actually start the game with 5 Gantt. This Gantt is a currency that's used to govern the order in which turn order is assigned. You'll see how that works when we get to phase 2. But now we're in round 1, phase 1. And in this phase, we count up each of our research departments. And for each research department, we're able to advance a marker on the board 1 step. Remember where I said in the solo variant, each one of the dummy players starts with 2 research departments. That is true, but for purposes of round 1, they pretend they only have 1, so they're only able to advance 1 marker 1 step on a track. Now, the markers you can advance are any player's marker on any research track, or you can advance your assembly capacity, your own assembly capacity. You wouldn't want to advance the assembly capacity of one of your opponents. Now, in later rounds, when we probably have more research departments can advance more markers, there is another rule, and that is that you can only advance, each player can only advance 1 marker 1 step. So if you had 5 research departments, for example, and you could advance 5 markers, you would have to choose 5 different markers, be they your marker on the assembly capacity, or your marker on one of these research tracks, or maybe green's marker on one of these research tracks, or purple's marker on one of these research tracks. I guess that begs the question right away, and that is, why on earth would you want to advance one of your opponent's markers, since advancing on these research tracks gives you the ability to know how to build a part? Why would you want to give that ability to one of your opponents? Let me start by explaining that right away. Because turn order in this game has a marked effect on what it is you're able to build and what it is you have permission to build. If you're first in turn order, now remember, turn order can change in phase 2. But let's say for the moment that, for simplicity's sake, that the turn order is not going to change and I'm going to be first in turn order. The player who is first in turn order has permission to build any car part that any player knows how to build. So if green was, for example, up here on tires on the range track and I was way back here still on engines, if I was first in turn order, I would know how to build tires, I would know how to build radiators, and of course I'd know how to build engines because my marker is there. It's not so much that I know how to build them, it's that I have permission to build them. Think of it this way, thematically, when you're first in turn order, you're the big honcho. You're like Apple or Microsoft. A lot of other industrialists or manufacturers look to you for guidance, and they're happy to share some of their information with you in exchange maybe for some other perks. So being first in turn order obviously gives you some really big advantages. So you don't have to worry so much about where your markers are. You just have to know where everybody's markers are on all the research tracks. If you're last in turn order, the opposite is true. You only know how to build what you know how to build. If your marker is still on engines, that's all you can build, even if everybody else's marker is well beyond that to the right. If your marker is down here on speed-type engines and somebody has advanced to car horns, which were called klaxons back then, klaxons, you would not know how to build a klaxon or a gear or tires to over here. You would only know what you know how to build based on the position of your marker on that track. Now, you can't combine tracks either. Just because maybe you know how to build tires over here doesn't mean that you have permission to build red tires, speed-related tires. Think of those as two different types of car parts, even though they're represented by the same tile on the board. You'll see examples of this later on. What about the person who's not in first or the person who's last in turn order? Well, that brings us to the general rule. The general rule is this, and it's a little confusing when I read it, but I'll follow it up with an explanation right away. The general rule is that you can build a car part on a specific research track as long as a number of players equal to the number next to your marker on the turn order track has reached or surpassed that space on the research track. So, for example, what does that mean for green, who is second in turn order? Well, let's take an example. Let's say red, me, was all the way over here on fuel tanks. And let's say the purple was over here on radiators, and green was way back here still on engines. Green, because he is second in turn order, will have permission to build a part as long as two other players know how to build that part. In a 5-player game, if you were third in turn order, you would have permission to build a part if at least 3 other players had the ability to build that part. So in my example, I know how to build fuel tanks, but nobody else does. So green would not have permission. I know how to build range-related tires. Nobody else does. So green would not have permission to build that either. Back here on radiators, both purple and I know how to build radiators. And because green is second in turn order and 2 of us, or at least 2 of us, know how to build that car part, that would mean that green would have permission to build that car part. So you just have to, in a 5-player game, if you're second in turn order, you can only rely on car parts that 2 people know how to build, at least. If you're third in turn order, yeah, you can only build car parts that 3 people know how to build at the very least. Over time, turn order is going to change. So let's say I know how to build a radiator, or I have permission to build a radiator, and therefore I build one in round 1. Then come round 2, turn order has changed, and my marker hasn't advanced on range. I no longer have permission to build a radiator. That doesn't mean I lose the radiator I already built. It just means I can't build another one until things change, until either I become first in turn order again, or earlier in turn order again, or my marker moves to the radiator space so I inherently know how to build radiators for the rest of the game. So, long explanation, but it's key to wrap your head around what it is you have permission to build over the course of the game as turn order changes. And again, let me stress that where player markers are on one track has no bearing on what it is you have permission to build on another track. So if your marker's over here on range tires, and you can build range tires, that doesn't mean that you have permission to build speed tires, or for that matter, safety tires. Each track is considered independently of the other tracks. So back to the original question, why might you want to advance another player's marker? Well, if you think odds are good that you're going to be first in turn order, for example, then you might want to move another player's marker because you know they may be farther ahead of you on a certain research track, but you know that at least for that round, as long as you're first in turn order, you're going to be able to build the part that you're giving them the knowledge on how to build. Of course, you're helping your opponent to a certain degree, but more importantly, you're also helping yourself. So, it is phase 1. I have one research department in my factory. I can advance any single player's marker on any research track, or I can advance my own marker on the assembly capacity track. I think for the most part, I am going to stick to advancing my own markers, especially since I'm playing against two AI players who are almost in cahoots against me. Because as you'll see, they don't usually mind moving their own marker, of course, or moving the other AI player's marker, but they'll only move my marker as a last resort. For my one research department, I'm going to advance on the speed track, primarily because the second space contains claxons, and that's a relatively small tile. As you can see, it's 2 by 2 in the tooltip. At the other end of the extreme, engines happens to be the largest car part, which is 4 by 4. So if I advance to claxons and know how to build claxons, I'm very much assured that I'll have plenty of space on my factory floor to set up a klaxon building station. And then we'll see what green and purple are going to do. This is all done, by the way, in turn order from left to right. So I'm going to claxons. Green is advancing his own marker on the speed track. He's going to claxons. Ruby's advancing herself one space on the range track, so she's going to know how to build radiators. Now we're in phase 2, and in this phase, we decide what the turn order is going to be for the rest of this round and for phase 1 of next round. And this is all decided in reverse Gantt order. So the player who has the most Gantt on the Gantt chart has first dibs on deciding which turn order position he or she wants to be in for the rest of this round. Then the player who has the next lowest Gantt will decide next, and finally the last player with the least amount of Gantt will decide last. If there happens to be a tie in Gantt between 2 or more players, you break the tie by turn order. So if green and red, for example, were both on the 3 space of the Gantt chart, since I am earlier in turn order than green, I would break the tie. I would go first and choose my turn order position for this round, then green, and then purple, because purple was behind both of us. Now, in this phase, you are deciding one of 2 things. You either pass, in which case you're basically saying, I'm happy where I am. I realize other people might change turn order, but I'm not going to spend my Gantt, which is my turn order currency, if you will, to change my turn order right now. And maybe purple is thinking to herself, hey, I'm last in turn order right now. That means I get to sell a car first. Maybe that's not such a big deal this round, but it might be a bigger deal next round, so I might be happy to stay put. If you don't pass and you decide to change your turn order, you would move your marker to one of these spaces, 1, 2, or 3. It had to be empty. In other words, if I decided to be first in turn order, then green after me could not choose to be first in turn order. The best he could do is stick with second in turn order, or decide to move himself into last in turn order. So basically, each one of us is going to be permitted to spend all of our Gantt and go all the way back down to 0 just to decide what we want our turn order to be. And then everybody else who passed will just sort of fall into line in the spaces that remain. Well, I'm already first in turn order, so while I can spend my 3 Gantt to absolutely lock in my turn order position, it's early in the game, and I already know how to build engines and klaxons. Heck, I don't know how to build radiators, but if I can't build a radiator, it's no great shakes. So I'm just going to decide to pass, and then we'll see what green does, because green's next in reverse Gantt order, and then we'll see what purple does. So I pass. Green passes. Ruby passes. Okay. Now we're in phase 3, the building phase. This is the meat of the game. This is really the fun part of the game, where everybody's head is down They know what parts they want to squeeze into their factory, and they just have to arrange things, hopefully in such a way that everything fits and that they don't sort of cut themselves off from expanding in the future. It's required that I build a car mainline so I can actually make cars. Otherwise, what's the point of the game? You'll notice my program isn't kind enough to put little markers on the parts that it knows that I know how to build or that I have permission to build. So obviously, everybody can build a car mainline, so I want to build one of those for sure. Everybody also has to build a dealership, because while it is the car mainline that makes the cars, it's the dealership that sells the cars. Now, right now, I don't know which size I want to start with. I think to be flexible, I'm going to just stick with the smallest dealership. So I'm going to pull that out here temporarily just so I have the tiles that I know that I want to build right at my easily at my disposal. And this is something I suggest for all beginning players, especially in round 1 and maybe round 2, because there are enough parts to go around that what you should do is take all the parts that you can use, put them out next to your factory, and then see what it is you can fit and what you can't fit or can't make work, put back. Just because you can build a particular tile or place a particular tile doesn't mean that you should. That's part of the strategy of the game. There is no money or nothing you have to spend in order to place a tile. Essentially, the only currency for placing tiles is available space. You are locked into this available factory space, particularly the space that's in black. So, for example, because these 2 tiles were placed during setup, but I said that I'm going to be allowed to move these around if I want to. Maybe I want to put the research department here, and maybe I want to put my planning department here to get them out of the way. Notice I rotated my planning department. You could rotate or flip any tile any which way. Let's get back to the point of what I want to try to place in this first phase 3 of round 1. I would like to get another research department, maybe even 2. I would like to build another planning department. You'll see, I already explained that research departments govern how many markers you can advance in phase 1. You'll find out that planning departments determine how much Gantt you gain in phase 4. I know how to build an engine. I know how to build a radiator, thanks to purple being on the radiator spot. And I know how to build a klaxon, because my marker is on the klaxon space on the speed track. So that's pretty much everything that I could build. Like I said, I could possibly fit in another research track, but I'll worry about that when the time comes. Now let me talk about the basic placement rules. Now there are rules about where tiles can go and how they have to be arranged. You can break any rule that you want while you're rearranging, and during all of phase 3 you can spend all the time you want rearranging and puzzling out where you want these tiles to be placed. And you can put them anywhere, and you can break any rule. But when the time comes that you say you're done and you're finished, you're not permitted to move any tile from that point on. And everybody else is going to look at your factory just to make sure you didn't accidentally break a rule, because you've got to make sure that every tile is placed legally. As far as generic components are concerned, the typical rules apply. You can't take a tile and try to move it, put it half on the factory and half not. So that's not permitted. You can't overlap or tuck tiles under another tile. That's not permitted. Tiles have to be either adjacent to the loading bay. So the loading bay is this gray diagonally striped box. And there happens to be a loading bay door, which is this whiter or lighter diagonally hatched line. That will become important a little bit later on in phase 3. So you can't have any tile in the loading bay or the loading dock. I use those terms interchangeably. Every tile has to either be adjacent to the loading bay or adjacent to other tiles that are adjacent to the loading bay. So this is legal. That's legal. All this is legal. This is not legal. Having your points touch or your corners touch is not valid. So that's not going to be allowed. I'm going to get an error if I try to say I'm done. My program's going to catch it and say, sorry, your research department can't trace a path back to the loading bay. And that pretty much ends the rules as far as standard tiles are concerned. Research departments, planning departments, main lines. They can't be in the loading bay. They have to be either touching the loading bay or touching another part on edge or other parts that trace a path back to the loading bay. And they can't overhang the board. Now we get to the fancier parts. So I got to think about what I want to do, and as I do it, I'm going to explain what it is I'm doing. Well, the biggest tile here is the engine, so let's get that out. And I'd like to put it on an edge for reasons you'll see later, so let's kind of just temporarily stick it there. Once you place a car part, you then have to place a single space-sized spec indicator that is adjacent to that car part. And so it has to be adjacent to it, and the arrow on the spec indicator has to be the same color as the track that ties back to where you learned how to build that particular car part, and that arrow has to be pointing at the car part. Now notice my program is prompting me to choose the adjacent location for the red spec indicator, the red speed track. And I know how to build a speedy engine, and I have to therefore place a red spec indicator adjacent to it. For now I don't care. I'm just going to put it here, and notice how it is pointing at the car part. Now I also know how to build engines over here because of my position on the range track. And therefore, my program is now prompting me to place a green spec indicator that also has to point to the engine. And I'm going to, for now, place it here. Now, you're going to think to yourself, well, what's the point of these spec indicators? They seem to be a hassle, and you have to remember to place them, and they're tiny. They could be a little fiddly. You will find out soon enough that spec indicators are of critical importance because they allow you to determine what features are built into your car and what buyers you're permitted to sell to. Also, the fact that they're tiny gives you flexibility in terms of where you place tiles, and that'll become clear too once I get my main line placed. Now, let me get my main line placed. You'll notice that a main line has 4 sides, A, B, C, and D. And again, you can rotate this, you can flip it so that, A and D are always going to be opposite each other, but B and C might be on different sides. This engine, which is type B, has to touch the B side or trace a path back through type B related tiles back to the B side of my main line. If I build a type D part, it has to trace a path back through type D parts, or spec indicators for that matter, that make their way back to the D side of the main line. So for example, I know I'm going to have to either get my main line down here adjacent to the loading bay or put something between it. Let me think of what I want to do. Well, the radiator is an A part, so you know what? Okay, let's put my car main line here, and I have A on the bottom, I have B on the left. So actually, that's good. So I'm going to stick with that, and then I'm going to take my radiator and rotate it So I can squeeze it in down here. Notice now it can trace a path back to the A side of the main line. I don't really care whether it's here or here. I'll just put it here. And now I have to place a spec indicator. In this case, I know how to build a radiator because of the purple position on the range track, so I have to place a green spec indicator pointing at the radiator. So I will just place it here. Now, I was saying that spec indicators might be tiny and all, but they do allow you to have some flexibility in placing tiles. For example, this is also legal. Notice my radiator is not currently tracing a path to the A side of my main line, but if I place my spec indicator there, now it is, and that's entirely legal. So you can see that spec indicators allow you to get car parts around tight corners and into places where they might not normally be able to be placed. Well, that's another thing I wanted to point about those spec indicators. For now, though, I'm going to keep my radiator over here and my spec indicator there. Now, currently, my engine is not tracing a path back to the B side, so I am going to shove it over here. And for the spec indicators, I could go here, but I'd like to keep this space open in case I want to build deep parts. In fact, I know I want to build a deep part. I want to build this klaxon. So I'm going to stick my spec indicators over here. And remember, I get 2 for the engine, 1 for red and 1 for green. So let's put the horn, or the klaxon, up in, let's put it here. That way I can expand either to the north or to the east with my type D components. I have to place a red spec indicator, so I will just place it here. Okay, now the dealership has to be adjacent to your main line, and I wasn't taking that into account. But actually, it's going to fit right there. So dealerships have to be adjacent to main lines have to be adjacent to dealerships. You can have a main line next to 2 dealerships. You can have 2 dealerships next to 1 main line. But let me tell you right now that that is not optimal, and you probably want to avoid doing that, especially when you're learning the game. Just stick with 1 dealership next to 1 main line. Obviously, with a dealership, it has to be adjacent to the main line, but you don't want to block off an entire side of the main line. For example, I wouldn't want my dealership there because then I couldn't build any type B parts connected to my main line. So right down here is perfect. So I'm going to leave my dealership here, and that one's called my, I don't know Italian, Pomigliano di Arco dealership. I'm going to stick with calling it my D'Arco dealership. Okay, I wanted to build more research departments and planning departments, so I'm going to build another one down here. Oh, do I want to build a marketing department? Those are optional, but if you build them, or build 1 or 2, they have to be adjacent to the dealership. I'm going to see if I can squeeze it in. So maybe I'll just put it there. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. You will see the benefit of having 1 or more marketing departments adjacent to your dealership later on when we get to the selling car phase. If I could fit 2, I would. I'd like to see if I can get another, well, I want to get a planning department in here. Actually, right there is a nice space for it. And you know I can get another research department right below it, there. And that's entirely legal. Everything traces back to the loading bay. And because it's round 1, I have to be sure that my first research department and my first planning department are either both adjacent to the loading bay or one is adjacent to the other, which is adjacent to the loading bay. And I do meet that rule. So the basic rules are Parts have to be connected or trace a path back to the loading bay. Main lines have to be next to dealerships, and dealerships have to be next to main lines. Both of those are mandatory. Research departments are optional, but if you build one or more, they have to be adjacent to the dealership. When you place a car part, it has to trace a path back to that particular side of the main line that matches its type. And you have to have one or more spec indicators adjacent to it that point at the car part that indicate what research track allowed you to have that car part on your factory floor. Now, the only thing I'm debating right here is, do I want to build a second marketing department and give up this research department, or do I want to have 3 research departments going into round 2? I think I want the 3 research departments. So I'm just going to stick with one marketing department adjacent to one dealership adjacent to my main line. Here's my radiator with a green spec tied back to the A side of my main line. Here's the engine on a type B part traced back to the B side of the main line with its spec indicators. And finally my klaxon type D with a red spec indicator, all tracing paths back to the D side of the main line. When you're done in phase 3, you place an expansion tile. So I have to decide where I want to expand. So an expansion tile looks like this. It looks like a mini factory floor, but it's much smaller. It has its own loading bay. It has its own loading bay door. When you place an expansion tile, you can never block the loading bay door. Otherwise, the cars wouldn't be able to leave the factory floor and go through the loading dock and off and out into the world. So this is not legal. And this is not legal, because now I'm blocking the factory's loading bay door. This is not legal, because that expansion's blocked. You know what, let me move things over a little bit. So you got to make sure that loading bay doors don't get blocked. I need to think, first of all, about what parts I plan to build next round. If I plan to build B parts, then I need to be expanding to the north, because there's no room in here to build B parts. And so I'm going to have to be up here if I want to build more B parts. As far as D, C, or A, that's all over here on the east side. And therefore, I would want to expand here for going into round 2. So let's see what's coming up. Now, I know right now, and I will explain later why I know, but I know that at the end of this, toward the end of this round, the speed track will be retired, will be removed, moved to the bottom of the off-board tracks, and the blue reliability track is going to take its place. It's the speed track that's going to get removed because the obsolescence indicator, this arrow, is pointing at it. And during setup, the obsolescence marker points at the research track on the x-axis. So at the end of, near the end of round 1, this track is going to go away, and it's going to get replaced by the reliability track. And that's something you know as of phase 2. And I'll explain why when we get there. After it's swapped out, a couple other things happen, but among them, the obsolescence marker then gets moved up here to point at the range track, so we know in round 2 that's the track that's going to get retired and substituted with something else. So knowing that reliability is going to come down here, well, there's a C part that I probably will learn how to build because I'll advance my marker next phase 1 into batteries. So I'll be able to build a Type C battery. I might advance my marker here and know how to build, well, I've already built a radiator. That's another rule, by the way. You cannot have the same part adjacent to the same main line. and no other main line. So you're not allowed to build redundant stations. I can't have multiple radiators, for example. That's a no-no. So this now it's possible purple might advance and allow me to build a Type D tire. But notice nowhere along here have I said I have to build a Type B part. So I'm going to expand this way. And for maximum flexibility, I'm going to rotate this. I'd like to get that loading bay way off to the side, maybe like that. Or maybe like that. And this, of course, has to be adjacent to the factory. So I would be happy with that, I think. That would mean that I have effectively blocked off southern expansion because the loading bay door is down here and I couldn't build another expansion tile down here because it would block that other expansion tile's loading bay. So if I'm building, if I'm expanding, I'm expanding to the east or I'm expanding to the north from this point on. You got to think about these things, otherwise you will block yourself off and you'll regret doing something. And that's the way this game is. Everybody's going to make mistakes no matter what. A round's going to come along, a phase 3 is going to come along, and they're going to say, why on earth did I build that part there? I wish I had moved over one space and had it there. But that's the joy of this game, of this puzzle. I'm going to put my expansion floor there. Now I should have paused. Because now we're going to see what my opponents are going to do. Now, they, of course, don't build factory floors and stuff. They simulate it. They essentially keep track of how many research departments they build, how many planning departments they built, if they built some marketing departments, and if they built additional main lines / dealerships. Now, if you were fast, you notice that Harrison already built a planning department. That every AI opponent will always build at the very least one planning department every round. And like I said, they will also, during phase 1, they will also add one to their assembly capacity at no cost. That's a freebie for an AI player. So Harrison already took a planning department. Let's see what else he does. I'll unpause. He takes another one and he takes a research department as well. So now he has 3 of each. And now let's see what Ruby does. She also builds 2 planning departments and 1 research department. So that's nice. They decided not to build marketing departments, unlike me. So I'm going to have an advantage over them when it comes to selling cars. And of course, they haven't built a main line, and it's unlikely you'd build a second main line in round 1. You wouldn't have the room for it. It's probably unlikely you'd build one in round 2 either, because space is at a premium. Now we're going into phase 4. In phase 4, the Gantt chart is updated, and something else happens that I really think should happen in phase 3 when you're building your factory. So let's assume that this thing happens in phase 3. I was watching Edward's fine playthrough, and he has done 2 great playthroughs of Horseless Carriage. So if you like this game, I would encourage you to watch them. You'll learn a lot. But he too agrees that it makes more sense to do this step in phase 3 than in phase 4. And that step involves tallying all of your, let me go back to my factory floor here, tallying all your spec indicators and replacing them with cubes that go on, ultimately on the dealership. So what you would normally do, let's say at the end of phase 3, is go side by side. So for your A side, look at every spec indicator that traces a legal path. And in this case, it's green. There's 1 green, so I would put a green cube on A. And then for B, I would look around and I would see, oh, there is a red and a green that trace a path back to B. So I would put a red and a green cube on my B side of my main line. I have one red indicator here, so I would put a red cube. And once you're done doing that, you move all the cubes from the main line to the adjacent dealership. My program keeps track of my cubes all the while that I'm building. If you noticed, they're all up here. So it already knows that I have 2 green cubes and 2 red cubes associated with dealership number 1, my smallest dealership. If and when I build a second or a third dealership, the medium will appear here and the large dealership will appear down here. Tallying these cubes, having these cubes is important because now you know where you can target buyers on the market board. The fact that I have 2 red cubes and 2 green cubes means that I can target, here's the red axis, the speed axis, I can market to any buyer all the way over here to the 2 space, to the 6th column of the market board, because I have 2 red cubes. And because I have 2 green cubes, 2 green spec indicators, if you will, I can market to any buyer who is all the way up to the bottom 6 rows. I can't go into here because I don't have 3 green cubes, but I can be up to here because I have 2 green cubes. So the number of spec indicators you build, the number of cubes you have, dictates who you can target when you're selling cars. And that's critical, because the more cubes you have of any color, the higher you can get up into this rich upper corner that will usually carry with it the highest price tag for a car. For now, it's just round 1. Everybody, there's not that many buyers, and they're all willing to pay $6. So if you made a mistake, or you blew it, or you didn't do anything, at the very least, these are all 3 of these buyers are in the 0-0 range. So even if you didn't have any red arrows or green arrows, you'd still be able to sell to them. You wouldn't be able to sell to this guy because you'd have to have at least 1 green cube. But for the most part, round 1 is pretty simple. You're given some slack, which is a good thing because there's a lot going on in this game, and that gives players a chance to catch up. So I think that step, technically it's part of phase 4. I really think it should be part of phase 3. So we know I have 2 red cubes and 2 green cubes. That tells me right now where I can target selling cars when it comes time to phase 5. In phase 4 is very simple. You count up how many playing departments you have, and you add that much to your Gantt track, your position on the Gantt track. So I have 3 playing departments, so I am going to go from 3 to 6. Green also has 3. I think everybody else has, green has 3 and purple has 3. They will also move up 3 spaces. So green will go from 2 to 5 and purple will go from 1 to 4. So let's go with that. You see red advances, green advances, and purple advances. And now green is tied with me. Why is green tied with me? Did I lie? Oh, that's a radiator, not a playing department. I only have 2 playing departments. That's why green is tied with me. I went up 2 spaces, but green went up 3. Okay, pardon me, that kind of looked like a playing department to me. Okay, now we're in phase 5. Now we are in the selling phase, and this is done in sales order, reverse turn order. So purple is going to have the first chance to sell a car. Let me explain how this works. They have a dealership, obviously, and a main line, but they don't have a marketing department. So they are going to be able to target cars with the smallest market window that exists. Every player has 9 market windows, 3 of each size for each one of their 3 dealerships. A small one that can be placed over a 1x2 section of squares in the market board. If you have 1 marketing department adjacent to your dealership, then you can have a 2x2 market window. And these market windows are little plastic frames. They're they're hollow. They just have a border, but you can move them around here, and you can overlap other market windows. They can hang off the edge of the board. There are really no rules except that they can't be placed into an area of the market board where you don't have the cubes to sustain that position. If you have 2 or more marketing departments next to a dealership, then that dealership can use a 3x3 size market window. Now, right now, we only made one car, so we can only sell one car, and it really doesn't matter what the size of our marketing windows are. But that will hopefully become more important down the road. And at least hopefully I'll have a little bit of an advantage because I do have that marketing department built, and I can capture more buyers if they happen to be within that 2x2 range. Anyway, clearly, let's see how many cubes purple has. So purple has 2 green cubes. It's telling me here we're currently looking at purple's display. Here's Ruby. She has 2 green cubes. The solo variant took care of all that. So she can place her 2x1 market window anywhere along here. Obviously, she wants to target buyers, so she's going to either place it here or maybe horizontally here. Any of those positions are legal. She can't go over here because she doesn't have 1 red cube. But because she has 2 green cubes, she can go as high as this row here. So she's just going to put it somewhere where she can capture 2 buyers, but she can only sell to 1 buyer, so it doesn't really matter. She's only made 1 car. So she is going to, of those 2 market niches or squares that she covers with her market window, she is going to pick 1 buyer to sell to and make $6. So let me unpause and we'll see what she does. She puts it down there, and she sells to that guy in the corner, and she makes $6. So now she's in the lead with 6 points. Dollars are points in this game, victory points. Basically, you just sell as much as you can, making as much money as you can, and that's your score at the end of the game. Now it's Green's turn in reverse turn order. He also doesn't have a marketing department. I already remember that. He can place 2x1. Let's take a look at his setup. He's got 2 red cubes, but no green cubes. So he can go out this way, but he can't get up into this row. So he can either overlap or place his market window right over purple, or he can place it vertically, either which way, and take and sell to either one of these buyers. And this is all really important. You have to look at your opponents, see what size their market windows are, how many dealerships they have, how many windows they're going to be able to place, because there's a whole other strategic element to Phase 5 in selling cars. Let's see what Green decides to do. He overlaps purple and just sells to that guy. Now, we already know that I have 2 red cubes and 2 green cubes, so I can place anywhere in here. I can't go there. Notice this square turns red. I can't go into the 7th column, and I can't go into the 7th row. But it doesn't matter. All the buyers are down here, and I only have 1 car to sell. So I'm going to position my window here, and I will sell to this guy. Doesn't matter. They're both $6 cars, so it doesn't really matter which one I choose. Once I sell, if purple had more cars and more buyers, then they could take another turn and sell. You essentially position your market window for a dealership. You pick a square within that within that market window, and then you sell as many cars to as many buyers as possible in that single square. And then maybe you'll get another turn when everything comes back around to you. In this case, we can only sell 1 car, so that will be the end of Phase 5. Phase 6 is very simple. Is the game over? The game ends when it's either round 7, which it's not, it's round 1, or the time clock has reached 0. There is a track that tracks the time on the main game board, To conserve space, I simply have the time marker down here in the bottom left corner. And for a 3-player game, it starts at 24. There are 3 ways the time clock can descend towards 0. 1, when any marker enters the 4th space or the 6th space of a research track. If you look carefully, you'll see a little punch clock or time clock symbol in the upper left corner of those spaces to remind you that the time clock descends by 1 if any time a marker goes into that space. Secondly, the time marker can drop down by 1 anytime a player's marker reaches 10 Gantt. You notice that marker there. Now, if they go to 11 and they spend all of it to change turn order, that doesn't count as crossing that same marker, that same 10 space again. It's only when you advance upward past that, or onto or past space 10, that you cause the time clock to descend. And it can happen multiple times for each player, depending on how many times they cross that space or land on it. And my program is going to actually play a little ding sound so that it keeps reminding me when time is descending. Right now it doesn't matter. It's going to be a while before the game ends, but as we get towards 0, I'm going to have to pay attention to that. So clearly the game is not over, so phase 6 is very fast. In phase 7, this is the phase where one research track is retired and is swapped with another off-board research track. So the one that's swapped out is the one that has the obsolescence marker pointing at it. And then during setup, it's always going to be the one on the x-axis. So the red speed track is going to leave. Now, how do you decide which of the 3 off-board tracks are going to take its place? Remember, I said way back when I knew it was reliability. But now let me explain the rules for determining which one you choose to take the place of the one you're removing. You, first of all, go track by track and count the spaces that occur based on marker positions to the right of the minimum spec bar on each track. So, for example, reliability, this is the minimum spec bar. Notice they're all between 0 and 1 on all of these tracks. It's actually a little wooden token or bar. Let's say green was here on the chassis and red was here on the battery. Well, green's 2 spaces to the right of the bar, and I'm 1 space to the right of the bar, so that's a value of 3 for reliability. You don't count any markers to the left of the bar. Let's say on the purple track, let's say purple was on the headlight space, and nobody else was beyond the bar. Well, purple is 3 spaces to the right, so the design track is a value of 3. Now, normally the one that has the highest value is the track that gets swapped in, but in this case we'd have a tie between blue and purple. To break the tie, you choose the track that has a marker that's farthest to the right of the vertical bar. So in this case, in my example, purple was on headlights, which is 3 spaces to the right. The best we were over here was a marker that was on chassis that was 2 spaces to the right. So in that case, purple would break the tie and purple would take the place of speed. In case of another tie, you just choose the top track of the 3 off-board tracks. Well, nobody advanced their markers on any of these 3 tracks, so their values for deciding whether or not they are contenders for the x-axis are all 0. So the tiebreaker for all that is the top track, and that's why I knew at the end of phase 1, I already knew that reliability was going to be the new track for next round. So it allows you to plan ahead. And nobody moved any markers on the off-board tracks during the last phase 1. So, unless there's a dramatic change, even though speed is coming off, it's pretty likely the speed might come back on the y-axis come round 3. But you kind of have to keep track of that and plan ahead accordingly. So speed is going to be moved to the bottom of the off-board tracks. Its minimum spec marker bar is going to move 1 space to the right, and a minimum spec token with a 1 on it is going to be placed in the minimum specifications box. What does all that mean? Well, I'll let phase 7 end, and then I'll explain it. So red and blue are going to swap. Red moves to the bottom. Its minimum specification bar advances 1 space to the right. Now reliability is over here on the x-axis. The obsolescence marker is now up here pointing at green. So at the end of round 2, green's going to get swapped out with another track. There is the red minimum spec marker for speed with a 1 on it on the minimum specification bar. That means going forward that a dealership has to have at least 1 red cube on it in order to sell cars. If it doesn't, it's not selling that round. Now currently I'm meeting the minimum spec because I have 2 red cubes. If I switch to green, green has 2 red cubes, so he is meeting the minimum spec. If I switch to purple, purple has 2 green cubes, but no red cubes. So purple has to make sure that she gets some red cubes, or at least 1 red cube, by the time phase 3 ends in round 2. Otherwise, she's not going to be able to sell cars next round. Now, over time, more tracks will have minimum spec markers here, and it's possible that one of these minimum spec markers will change from 1 to 2. Okay, so that's how minimum spec markers work. Right now, for purposes of swapping tracks, next round, red's track has a value of 2. Because red is on space 2, is 1 space to the right of the bar, and green is 1 space to the right of the bar. So it's possible that people might advance markers on safety and design, and maybe one of those tracks will get swapped out with green next round, but that remains to be seen. Now it's phase 8, the last phase of round 1. This is where the players decide where on the market board they might like to target buyers. They have a little bit of control over where buyers might appear on the market board for the next round. It's round 1. When you're playing the basic game, you only have 8 cards. If you're playing the normal game, I think you have 17 cards because there's combinations of cars and trucks and sports cars in all sorts of different places. You cannot play a card unless the round indicator in the bottom left corner of the card is equal to or less than the round in which you're playing it. So right now I can only play one of these 2 cards. And when you play a card, each player is going to take a card, one of their cards that they're able to play, and place it face down on one of the quadrants of the market board. And that's going to determine, well, we'll talk about that when the time comes. For now, let me just pick a card and decide what quadrant I want to put it in. Well, how many blue cubes do I have? I have 0 blue cubes. So right now, I'm only going to be able to target people down here in this first column. But I'm sure I'm going to move my marker into this battery space in phase 1 of round 2, so I'm sure I'm going to be able to build a battery. And a battery is not a big part. It's also 2 by 2. So I'm going to have at least 1 blue cube. I'm not going to have more than 1 blue cube because nobody's going to be able to get their marker into the second space because you can't move a marker twice. So each of us at best is going to have 1 blue cube. And that pretty much means that I certainly don't want to drag my card out here or here because I'm not going to be able to sell to guys over there. I'm only going to be sell to buyers that are, well, I could sell to buyers up here because I do have 2 green cubes. I'm sorry. But let's say I only have 1 blue cube, so I'm stuck in these first 4 columns, and unless I add another green cube, I'm kind of stuck below on or below this third row. Am I going to be able to build get another green cube? If somebody advances to range, like purple, and I'm still first in turn order, I might be able to build tires and get another green cube, which would get me up into this area. I'm feeling pretty confident, so I think I'm going to take this card and place it face down in this quadrant. What that means is that ultimately a buyer is going to appear in this square relative to this quadrant. So this square is equal to this square if I place the card in this third quadrant up here in the top left. So that means a buyer is going to appear. Now, in fact, what's going to appear there is a spark marker. A spark marker is a marker that says that one buyer for every spark icon is going to appear there for every round for the rest of the game going forward. So you're not just deciding where buyers appear, you're deciding where demand exists for the rest of the game. I could choose this card, but that would be up here, and there's no guarantee I'm going to have three green cubes. So I'm going to take my second card, place it face down here, and then I'm going to pause, and we can see that everybody else placed their card face down in quadrant 3 as well. Now, this is all done in regular turn order, by the way. I went first, then green, then purple. Once everybody's played their cards, the cards are revealed, spark markers are placed, and then buyers are placed where spark demand expects them to be placed. We'll get to that step in a second. Let's just get the spark markers placed. So each card's going to get revealed one by one here. So there's my card, and that's going to cause a spark marker to appear in this space. And because there's one punch clock on the bottom of the card, I should have pointed that out when we were looking at the hand, you can control how much the time marker descends, because some cards have one time clock, some have none, some have as many as 4. But you can't play one of those cards in round 1. Best I could do is knock the time clock down by 1, which is what I just did. This is a spark marker. It's a pink token. I believe it's a little token with a little car symbol on it. By the way, the buyers are not represented by purple tokens with numbers on them. They're actually represented by little purple cars. But it's more feasible in my program to put numbers than to try to fit little car icons in each square. It would get pretty busy and cluttered. Okay, let's unpause and see what green did. So green played this card into quadrant 3, so a spark marker is going to occur in this square. And he also caused the time marker to descend. It's down to 22 now. Purple did the same thing, played a card that had a spark marker put into this square. Now, I should say that everybody's deck of cards is different to some degree. So when you play, and if you're the blue player, then you get the blue deck of cards. And your cards are slightly different from everybody else's. You'd want them to be, because you wouldn't want everybody placing the same card and causing all the buyers to congregate in the same square. But anyhow, purple's playing a card that's causing a marker to appear here, a spark marker, so one's going to go up to 2. Then you place cards based on the spark markers. These spark markers will not go away for the rest of the game. If anything, they might increase. So one car is going to be placed here, and 2 cars are going to be placed here. And in future rounds, more cars will be placed in these squares, either 1 or 2, or maybe more if players play more cards that cause more spark markers to appear in those squares. When you're doing that, the number of cars in a square cannot exceed 2 times the number of spark icons. So it's not possible to have, right now, more than 4 cars in this square, because 2 times 2 is 4. That's not anything we have to worry about right now because there are no buyers in this square. So the only thing that's going to happen is we're going to have 2, nowhere near 4. But in future rounds, that might become an issue, that limit. So now all the cards populate where spark markers appear, just like that. So now we've got some buyers up in quadrant 3, and we have this leftover buyer down here in quadrant 1. You know, the last thing that happens after all of that is that you draw some more cards from this neutral deck. Remember, I may have mentioned there's a neutral deck of 6 cards when you're playing the basic game. I think I don't remember how many cards are in the neutral deck when you're playing the normal game. During setup, we drew a number of neutral cards equal to 1 plus the number of players, and we placed 4 buyers down here in the lower left quadrant. During phase 8, you shuffle the deck, you draw a number of neutral cards equal to the number of players in the game. You place one of those cards into quadrant 2, another one into quadrant 3, and all the other ones in quadrant 1. So we're going to be drawing 3 neutral cards. It's going to cause a buyer to appear here, a buyer to appear somewhere in here, and the third card is going to cause another buyer to appear down here randomly. So it adds a little random element to what might happen as far as buyers are concerned. The placement of those buyers is not limited by the number of spark markers. So they just get placed based on the cards you draw. So one's there, and one's there. And now we're to phase 1 of round 2, and it's my turn again because I'm still first in turn order. So now I'm going to proceed with the game, and maybe not talk so much, and maybe save my voice a little bit. But I'll remind you what's happening in each round as we go. So I have 3 research departments. I can advance 3 different markers. Clearly, I'm going to advance my capacity marker by 1 because I want to build more cards. So I'm going to be able to build 2 cars in this round instead of just 1. So that's one of my research departments I'm using. I said earlier I want to be able to build this small battery part because that's going to be easy. So I'm definitely going to advance this marker. And I could advance into radiators and make sure I can, but I have no need to build another radiator. I have already built one. I might need to build another one if and when I build another main line. The question is, do I want to start advancing in any of these, or do I even want to advance into gears on the speed track? Because right now, depending on what green and red do, it looks like speed is going to come back into play and replace the green track, because it has 2 markers to the right of the bar. But it may change once we see what purple and green do. I think I do want to move my marker on speed into the gear space. I'm not going to build those gears now. I can't because I don't know. It's a type B part, and I have no room to build it over here in the type B side of the main line. But I'm planning ahead, and I'm also kind of forcing speed to come back into play as opposed to safety and design. So now let's see what Harrison decides to do. Remember, Harrison has 3 research department. He gets a free advance of his assembly capacity, so he's already at 2. Let's see what he decides to do. He is moving his own marker one space on reliability, just like I did. He's advancing his own marker 1 space on the speed track, just like I did. So he's now into gears. That pretty much guarantees right now that speed is going to come back into play in round 3. And lastly, he's moving Ruby 1 space on the reliability track, the blue track in the x-axis. And now it's Ruby's turn. She has 3 research departments. She gets her extra capacity. She's advancing herself on the range track. She's going into tires. She's advancing Harrison on the range track. See, she's not going to advance me. That's the last thing she's going to do. And finally, she advances herself on the reliability track into chassis. Into chassis. I get chassis, plural of chassis is chassis. Now we're moving to phase 2 where we decide in reverse Gantt chart order what we want turn order to be. Green and I are tied. I'm earlier in turn order, so I'm going to have first choice. Do I want to spend my 5 Gantt to lock in turn order? If I do ensure that I'm first in turn order, it would mean that I would be able to build tires thanks to Ruby, and a chassis thanks to Ruby. Is it worth it to me to spend my Gantt, all my Gantt, to stay in first in turn order so I could build those car parts? I think the answer to that is yes. It means I'm giving up going first in sales order when it's time to sell. But right now I think it's in my best interest to be first in turn order for purposes of having permission to build certain parts. So I am going to choose first in turn order and spend all my Gantt and go back to 0. Green decides to pass. Purple decides to pass. So it's red, green, purple. The turn order has not changed. And now we're into phase 3 and we're building our factories. So let's look at what I can build here. But I can also very easily figure it out by just looking at the research track. So I know I can build a chassis, so let's get that out. That's a big part. I know I can build tires, so let's get that out. That's a type D part. I probably want to get another research department and another planning department at the very least built. So let's get those out. And what else? Oh, the battery. So let's get a battery out. So the pink circles indicate what I can build that I don't have, that I have not yet built. And the dark purple circles indicate that I have permission to build that part or place that tile, and I've already placed at least one of them on my board. So we're taking a battery and putting it out here as well. So this, let's start with the chassis. That's a big part. It is type A, so it needs to trace a path to the A side of my car main line, and wow, that fits perfectly like that. That's great. So the chassis is thanks to purple's position on the blue reliability track. So now I'm going to place a blue spec indicator, and I'm going to tuck it over here above the loading bay. Great. Let's now look at my C part, which is the battery. I can put that simply right there. And spec indicator, so this is going to be blue as well, I'll put right here for now. Lastly, we have the tires, which are going to go up here. Boy, you can't ask for a better fit than that. That's just great. So that fits there. That is connected to the D side of the main line, of the main line. That is going to get a green spec indicator. Place the spec indicator. I'll just tuck it in there. Let's say I build my planning department here. That means D can expand upwards in the future. If I place my research department here, I am now blocking off expansion of type C parts, unless or until I build a second main line somewhere. Question is, if I look at green, blue, and red research tracks, am I going to need to build type C parts anytime soon? Well, no, not on the green track. There is a dashboard way out here on the right end of the speed track, but it's not going to happen anytime soon. And these are all A's. Well, so no, there's no type C part on blue. So I'm comfortable blocking off now, cutting off my ability to build type C parts. So I'm going to put my research department there. And I'm pretty happy with that. So now I have to decide where I'm expanding. I guess I'm going to expand to the north, clearly. So how do I want to position this? Now that's not legal because the loading bay door is blocked, so I got to rotate that at least once. I'm not going to be expanding to the west because notice I don't have any car parts over here. So as long as I'm around there, I'm okay. But you know what? Let's keep rotating until it's like that. I think that looks pretty good. That allows me to expand B and expand D, but I won't be able to expand to A. And likely, well, there's going to be car bodies coming up, but that won't be important until the round after next round. And there are no other there's a type A part here. There's another radiator over here. So, yeah, I'm definitely going to expand into B and D parts. So, I think that's pretty good. Oh, wait a second. Wait. Next round, speed's going to come back into play in the vertical axis. And it's likely that I am going to advance into tires on the red track, which means that I'm going to want to place another spec indicator, or a red spec indicator, next to my tires. I don't have to build another set of tire tile. I just have to place another spec indicator next to it, a red one, to indicate that now I know how to build red-related tires in addition to green-related tires. I need to have room to put that spec indicator. That means I think I want to do that, because I can then tuck the spec indicator in the bottom right corner. Yeah, let's do that. Okay, so Green is adding to his supply of planning and research departments. He built 2 more planning departments and 1 more research department. And Red is doing the same. So nobody else built main lines, nobody else built marketing departments, so I still have that 2x2 market window, and everybody else has a 2x1 market window. Now we get to phase 4, where Gantt increases based on the number of planning departments. Oh, Green made it to 10, so the time clock descended to 20. Purple's up at 9, and Red is me. I went from 0 to 3. And I paused because now we're in the sales phase again. We're selling cars. And we do this in reverse turn order, so purple sells first. Now let's take a look at Ruby's cubes. She got her minimum spec. So she has 1 red cube, so she can sell. And she has 1 blue and 3 green, which means she could potentially get up into this area. She's going to probably put her window right there, and on her first turn, sell 2 cars. She can only sell up to 2 cars, that's it. So she's just going to sell out to those 2 guys at $6. Now, remember I said that price tags are assigned to every diagonal gradient where at least 1 car, 1 buyer appears. There are no buyers up here. There are no buyers here, but there are buyers here, so they got 6. There is no $5 price tag, so this gradient got the $4 price tag. So these people are buying cars for 6. These people are buying cars for 4. She's going to go right there, and she's going to sell her 2 only cars that she made to these guys, and she's going to earn $12. It's an easy decision for her. And there she goes. So she goes from 6 up to 18. Let's take a look at Green. So Green has 2 green and 3 red and no blue, which means he's stuck right here. He also is placing a 1x2 market window, he can sell as many as 2 cars, but he can't position his 1x2 window in such a way as to even have a chance of selling the 2 cars. What's green doing? He's just overlapping, he's selling, and he goes from 6 to 12. So I'm going to place my market window here and sell to this guy. Now, then it'll go back to purple, but purple's already sold 2 cars. Then it'll go to green. Green can't sell any more cars because there are no more buyers in his market window. Now I can sell the other car that I made to this buyer down here for $4, and I'll be in second place with a score of 14. Then we move into phase 6. So the score is purple at 18, red 14, green 12. Phase 6 determines, is the game over? The game is not over. The time marker is still at 20. It's plenty of time to go. Phase 7 is when the tracks get swapped out. So green's going to get moved to the bottom of the off-board tracks. The track that has the markers farthest to the right of the bar is red, so as expected, speed is now going to be in the y-axis of the market board. Then green's minimum spec, the bar is going to move to the right, and the green spec indicator is going to appear in the range box over here under minimum specs. But we'll get to that in a second. So green and red are swapping places. Green's at the bottom, the minimum spec goes up. The obsolescence arrow is pointing now at reliability, so it alternates. Speed is in the y-axis now. Now, any dealer who wants to sell cars has to have at least 1 red cube and 1 green cube. I easily meet that standard. Green meets that standard. Purple meets that standard. So everybody is in good shape as far as meeting the minimum spec. Notice that speed has a minimum spec of 1. So notice that its y-axis has changed from 0, 1, 2, 3 to 1, 2, 3, 4. Because it has a minimum spec of 1, the lowest value on the bottom of the y-axis is 1, and then you go to 2 and 3 and 4. So the scale is different on the y-axis than it is on the reliability or x-axis. And now, once again, we are picking a card, and it has to be one of these 4 cards, because the one that has a 1 or a 2 in the corner. I have to pick a card. I have to decide how many time clocks I wanted to send the clock by, and I have to pick a quadrant where I want to place that card. Do I think I can sell up into this quadrant? I have 2 blue and 2 red. I could certainly sell into here. No, I can't. I can sell. I can get to here, but I can't get to here on green. On red, can't get into this little set of squares on red because I only have 2 red cubes. What are my odds of getting another red cube? Oh, I know I'm getting another red cube. I'm going to be able to get that spec marker on tires, if you recall, the red spec marker. So I'm going to have 3 red and 3 green easily. So I'd like to put buyers here, which means I can play this card into the quadrant 4. I would generate 2 buyers, 2 spark markers in these 2 squares. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go right there. And then green is also going into quadrant 4, but purple is not so confident, and she is going into quadrant 2, the bottom right quadrant. So that's my card. So my spark markers are going to appear here and here. Green played that card. We played a round 1 card, so he's only putting 1 spark marker out, and it's going right there. And purple played into quadrant 2, so its spark marker is going to appear here. Then buyers get generated. Again, we're not going to hit the spark marker limit, so we're going to have a lot of buyers appear. And then 3 new random buyers are going to appear based on draws from that neutral deck. 1 in quadrant 2, 1 in quadrant 3, and 1 in quadrant 1. There we are. And once again, I get first choice in round 3, phase 1. Notice that there are no buyers up here, so there's no price tag. The first set of buyers occurs here, so that these cars are going to sell for 6. These cars are going to sell for 4, and these cars are going to sell for 3. There's 1 buyer down here, 1 lowly buyer who's a cheapskate and wants to buy a cheap car, doesn't care very much about what's on it, just wants to get from point A to point B. But these guys up here want some fancy features. They want a reliable car. They're willing to pay more. They want a car that can go fast and has extended range, so they're willing to pay a lot more money. So, round 3, phase 1, I again want to up my capacity, so that's one of the research departments I'm going to spend. So now I can build 3 cars. I wanted to advance into tires, so we're going to do that. And I advanced into the 4th space. I wasn't keeping track of the time marker when the cars got played, but notice we're down to 19 now. I didn't hear too many dings, so I guess people weren't trying to rush the clock. So I advanced into tires. I might as well advance into chassis, even though I've already built one, but I'd like to keep my marker up on blue. And this is my last advancement. I can advance on range. I mean, look, chances are range is what's going to come back. But maybe I can... Since I'm up here in B territory, B-type territory, boy, this would be... I'm going to up my marker on safety and see if anybody else decides to join me. So I'm going to go into brakes, which is a small part, 2 by 2. See what other people decide to do. Okay, green advances on assembly capacity, advancing on the range track, advancing on the design track into paint, and advancing on the reliability track. And lastly, advancing on the speed track. He didn't follow my lead. There goes the time marker again. Purple advancing on the speed track. On the range track. Oh, so range is definitely coming back into play. Again, the time clock, she entered the 4th space. Advancing Harrison, dropping the clock again because of an advancement of the 4th space, and she advances herself into car bodies, improving the body of the car over here on blue. Harrison has the most Gantt, so he gets to decide first what he wants turn order to be. So is he going to spend his Gantt? Nope, he passes. Ruby is changing turn order. Ruby decides she's not interested in selling first. She's interested in being able to build more parts. So she's taking over first in turn order. Question is, do I want to spend my 3 Gantt? Obviously, I'm not going to choose to go second because that's going to happen anyway, but I could choose to sell first. And I think that's wise. I think I will do that. I'll spend my 3 Gantt and go take last place, which means green will go second. And then we can see that Ruby just upped her planning and research departments. Boy, the counts are getting pretty low over there. Harrison did the same. Nobody's building main lines or marketing departments. And here we are in the build phase of round 3. Okay, what am I building? Well, gears. Remember, there were gears. Oh, before I forget, get that spec indicator for tires. Right there. That gets me another red cube. I'm at 3 reds and 2 blues. I want to build the gears, and I can because my marker is over here on tires. So I'm going to take a gear that is a type B part, and boy, that just fits right there. That's great. And I'll put the spec marker up there, which gets me another red cube. I'm at 4 and 2, 4 reds, 2 blues. Now, should I bother building brakes? Yeah, might as well. It's a small part. It's 2 by 2. And it's a B part. I want to leave this space open. Let's put the spec indicator here. Let's add a research department right here. I'm leaving room for D to expand up if there's a narrow D part that'll fit. Right now I don't have one, but I'm probably going to expand to the east anyway. I think I'm going to build another main line. I wonder if I should have built a main line this round. I don't know if I could have fit it, because I would need a main line which is 4 by 3, and I need, this dealership was 4 by 4. That would be tight, and then I wouldn't get that other red cube. Yeah, I'm going to just plan on possibly another main line next round. So I will leave it at that. I will expand to the east so I can expand D and B, but I still won't be expanding A, which is going to be tricky because purple's going to get into bumpers soon. But that doesn't mean that, I know I can get into car bodies, but I won't be able to build that right away. But I will be able to get into fuel tanks, and that's a pretty big part. Yeah, how about something like that? That would allow me to expand to the north in round 4. I'm good with that. Okay, now phase 4, everybody's Gantt increases. Purple and I are both in 0, so green's way up there at 17. And then we go to selling, and I get to go first. And I've got 2 blues and 4 reds, so I can go really high. I don't need to, but I can't go over here. So I can't capture that guy. I can go there. Now, see, this is where it gets tricky. I got to look at each other player. So green has 4 reds and 1 blue. So green's stuck over here. Green's going to probably target there. Purple has got 4 reds and 3 blues. She's going to target up in here. I don't have a chance of selling 4 cars. If I go there, I can sell those 2 to those 2 buyers, and then take the one that green doesn't take. So I could sell 3. At least I'm guaranteed to sell 3 cars. If I go here and sell 1 car, it's possible that, well, if I sell this one, it's probable that purple, or whoever that was, I think it was purple that had all the cubes, would then go down here and guarantee selling 2. So maybe I can't go there though. I'd have to go here and take one of those. And I could take the one. So anyway, what would that get me? That would get me 2 buyers at 4. That's $8. But if I go here, I think I'm guaranteed 3 buyers at 4 for 12. I think that's a better deal. Yeah, I'm going here. I'm selling 2 of 3 cars to these guys here. Then green's going to go next. He's probably going to go here. No, he goes there and takes the 1. He knows it's a lost cause. Purple goes up there and is going to get two sales at 6. But I got another chance and I can sell to this guy at 4. And now purple sells the other car and green is out of buyers. So we're tied, purple and I, at 30. Green is trailing way behind at 16. Now we're going, for phase 6, the game doesn't end because we're at 16 on the clock. Phase 7, blue is going out and green is coming in. So these are the only 3 tracks we care about. Then the blue will have a minimum spec of 1, so everybody's going to have 1 blue, 1 red, and 1 green. So blue comes out, green goes in, blue's minimum spec goes up. Now notice that the X and Y axis are both 1, 2, 3, 4, because both green and red have a minimum spec of 1. And does everybody meet red, green, blue? I do. Green does. Purple does. So everybody's okay on selling cars. Now the question is, where do I want to create demand? I can't play this last card, but I could play any of the other cards. Do I want the clock to go down? Maybe not. It's a tie. So maybe I play this card. I've got 4 reds, 3 greens. I'm probably not going to get another green cube. So I'm going to be stuck. I'm not going to be able to get into these last 2 columns. So I'd like to play into here. I think it's this card into quadrant 4 for me. Have the other guys gone? They have. Oh, I already know that green and purple are playing into quadrant 2 down here. I think I'm going to play this card to quadrant 4. Let's see where everybody goes. So the clock goes down. Buyers appear there. Buyers are going to appear here. What demand is, I should say. Now buyers appear. Some random buyers appear. And now we're into round 4, and Ruby is going first. So I paused. So you can see the board is pretty populated. These are cars selling for 6, for 4, and for 3. What's Ruby going to do? Advancing on the design track. Really? Advancing on the range track. Radiators. Green radiators. Double radiators, I should say. She advances on reliability. She knows that's coming back. She advances Harrison on reliability. She advances on the speed track as well. Now it's Harrison's turn. His capacity goes up to 4. He's going up on range into the set. So that this is an interesting case where you can have 2 green spec indicators on radiators. It's interesting. I think that's the only part that appears twice on the same track, but I might be wrong about that. Harrison advances on the speed track up into fuel tanks. Advances Ruby on the speed track to tires. Advances Ruby on the range track way up there into the gears. Advances himself 1 space on safety. And now it's my turn. 5 research departments. Capacity for 1. get myself into fuel tanks for sure. Boy, I'm stuck down here on range. I don't know why I'm so low. But I might as well bring myself up. I don't think there's any chance of any trek other than reliability. So let me get myself into car bodies, because I think that's coming back. I can advance here, but I don't think it makes a difference. Yeah. Harrison passes. Ruby is changing turn order, going last. Oh, dear me, that's interesting. Well, if she's going last, I might as well go first. Oh, boy. I've got to build that main line, for sure. Okay, so I will take first place. And now a lot of options are open. I can now build bumpers, car bodies, fuel tanks, which is a B part. Oh, yeah, I can fit it. Paint. Paint the outside of the car. They're not going to be all black. And this would only give me another yellow, so I don't know if that's going to happen. But I can build a windshield. First things first. Let's give myself some room. Get that main line out. Where is it going to go? And how is it going to be arranged? I've got to... That ties in B and D and gives me room to expand in A and C. Oh, it might be a problem with the fuel tanks. I could get fuel tanks here. Oh, and that still gives me room to expand A's. So fuel tank there with a spec over there. Or thanks to green and red. Oh, I get a red and a green spec for fuel tanks. Let's put it there. So there's two specs for fuel tanks, thanks to both the green track and the red track. Let's get a bumper here, and I could tie it in there with that spec indicator. That gets me another blue cube. Oh, shoot. Wait a second. I gotta get my dealership. Let's discard the bumper. I gotta get the dealership built. Oh, darn it. That blocks off all of C. This is no good. Let me get that out of there. This is gonna have to come up like that, or even like that. Which means I lose credit for... unless I tie in D. What am I building D-wise here? Oh, I could build a windshield. Okay, let's temporarily put the main line there. And the dealer here. I can build this windshield fits there. That allows, all that does, it gives me a yellow spec, but it ties in the, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, it ties in the D mainline side of this new mainline, the D side, way down, so I get credit for all these other spec arrows. Notice, here's my second dealer now, populating with cubes. So let's put that there and that there. And now I'm up to 2 green, 4 blue, and 2 yellow on this second main line. I'm not getting credit for the battery because C is just on its own up here, so I can fit another battery up there. That gets me another green. Well, I'd like another green for that main line up there, but I don't have room. All the parts are big. Batteries was the... yeah, I think that's the best I can do. And now I'm going to expand so I can build 8 parts, because those are going to be big next round with blue coming back into play. So let's get rid of the fuel tank. Wow, this battery was critical. Oh my, I didn't realize that. If I wouldn't have met minimum spec without it. Notice I don't have any blue cubes, but once I put the battery in place up here, I meet the spec. So I can sell. Otherwise I wouldn't be able to sell. Green and red. Oh no, I need the blue. So the hell with the fuel tanks. I can't fit the car body, that's too big. I could do paint, but paint is a purple spec that doesn't help me. I could throw in another plane. No, there is one more planning department. I guess I could throw it in here to over here. And then I expand here. Let's rotate. I gotta get B's room. I need room for B's, A's. I think I have to do this, something like this. That gives room for C, A, and B. Okay, let's do that. Harrison. Oh, he added a main line. He's doing 2 main lines as well. Ruby. He's also doing a second main line. Oh, it's going to get heated, the competition now. This is going to get interesting. And these are all 2x1 windows, remember. Because none of us have marketing departments for that second main line. Phase 4, the Gantt increases. Phase 5, Ruby is going first. She has 2 dealers. Which one she's going to choose? She's going to go with her Socho dealership, which has 5 greens and 4 reds. And she's probably going to go in here. Or can she get into there? She's got enough greens. She can. She's going over there. And she is definitely going to sell those 2. Then green is going with his big dealership first. And where's he putting it? Just above. He's going to those other 2 buyers. He sells 2 cars. What do I want to do now? So my D'Arco dealership is a medium. It's a 2x2. I could go over here and sell 4 cars at 4. Ooh, I could go down here. He has 3 green cubes. And kind of pick off these. Yeah, I think I'm going to go with D'Arco. Go right there. Sell 3 cars. At 4, not at 6. Purple goes with her other dealership over here, sells 2 cars at 4. Green going over here, selling 1 car. Back to me. Do I sell with D'Arco or do I place Grugliasco? Grugliasco has 2 green, 4 reds. Oh, I can't get up into here with Grugliasco. I could steal this. No, I don't have 3 reds. I can't get up into here. I'm going to have... Oh, shoot. I may have... maybe I should have placed Grugliasco first. I could steal the buyer from purple. He'd be pissed. Then again, I don't want these guys to disappear on me. I'm gonna go with D'Arco and just sell this guy in the corner. So I can't remember if Green placed his second dealer window or not, but that ends capacity for that dealership Purple sells that car. Green does, yeah, green had another dealer he places over there. Now I'm left with 4 cars to sell for Gugliasco with a 1x2 window, and he's very limited where he can go. I'm not going to be able to do it. Oh, I can get those 2. 4 reds and 2 greens. Yeah, I can go up here, so I can sell at least 2 cars. 2 of the 4. So I'll sell that one. Make sure purple doesn't steal it. Purple is out. Green is out. So it's back to me. I can sell 1 more car at 4. Takes us into phase 6. Yep, you know that. Phase 6, game doesn't end. Phase 7, this is probably going to be the last round, I think. Speed is going to get swapped out with reliability. Now the minimum spec on red is 2 red cubes. I'm meeting the spec. Green is meeting the spec. Purple is meeting the spec. Everybody is in good shape, and I hold a pretty decent lead. So I'm playing this card into quadrant 3. Buyers appearing over here. Green's playing that card into quadrant 2. Buyers appearing over here. Purple playing to quadrant 4 up into here. And now I'm first in turn order going into round 5. Oh, it probably will be the last round once we get through this phase. I think I'm ready to rush this a little bit. Let's advance me on red. That knocks it down to 3. Actually, I gotta get my capacity up, obviously. I might as well go up here. That knocks it down. I think everybody else is going to force it to fall down as well. I got 1 more marker to go up on. But I can seal the deal by upping green on red, which is what I'll do. So now it's down to 1. Green is probably going to make the time clock. There it goes. So this is the last round. And game will end in phase 6. And I don't need to narrate this. You can just see what green's doing. Wow, he advanced me. That's a rarity. Going up in safety. Reliability. Yep. Harrison on reliability. And range. Me on range. Wow, everybody's being so generous all of a sudden. Harrison's changing turn order. He's going last. Ruby's changing turn order, going second. I obviously pass. Ruby's going first. I obviously pass because I'm going second any way I cut it. Ruby adds a marketing department, 2. She's got a bigger market window. Okay, so what am I building here? Car bodies for sure. That's an A part. Probably there. And that's car bodies is a blue spec. What else can I build? Bumpers? Bumpers from blue, yep. Let's go there. And that's a blue spec. fuel tanks. Where are my fuel tanks? Fuel tanks are an A part. No, they aren't. Fuel tanks are a B part. That's going to slip in there. Just like that. I'm going to have to... Oh, I can just do that. That gets a... Am I getting both a red and a green? I am. There are no playing departments left. Radiator, green radiator. Where's my radiator? Oh, I thought... Oh, can I get another green... I'm up here on green. Oh, no. Yeah, I should be able to get double green. There's a bug. It's not letting me do it. It's not letting me add a green indicator there. That sucks. But that reminds me, I could build a radiator up here because this doesn't tie into that radiator. So let's put that there. And will it get me a double green here? It doesn't. That's a bug. Okay, I'm making note of that. I should be able to get 2 green specks. But I'm happy. I got 4 greens. I think I'm pretty good. I'm a little low on blue for Diarco. But I can't... Can I fit a chassis? It's 3... No, I can't fit a chassis. Can I build a battery? I've already got the battery down here, so I can't build another one. I can't build an engine. So that's all I can do for blue, I think. So that's about it. Let me continue. Now, normally, technically, you would add another expansion tile here, but my program knows that the game's over, so there's no point in adding another expansion tile, so it's going to skip that step. It's going to go right to phase 4. Gantt increases, but it doesn't matter because there's not going to be a phase 5. There's not going to be a round 5. Green is going first. Wow, he's got lots of green. Well, he doesn't need the red, but he's fine on green and blue. So he's selling 3 at $4 each. I go second. Diarco has 4 green, but only 2 blue. So I could maybe grab this set. Grugliasco has 4 green and 3 blue, but that's a small dealership. Boy, I don't want to spend a lot of time thinking about this. I'm going to choose Diarco. Target these guys. I'm missing, you can't go up there. Somebody may steal these buyers from me, but I'm going to start with selling to this guy. No? Yeah, I want to sell to this guy. Sell 2 cars. Purple has built a marketing department. She's just made 3 sales. She's coming back strong. Green stole 2 of my buyers. I might as well get my other... Well, wait a minute. Gugliasco. Can I sell cars 3 blue? Go up into here and steal from purple. Right? Let's go with Gugliasco. That's exactly what I'm doing. I'm stealing those buyers. Purple sells another car. Green It places another window. Look at that. Oh, shoot. Red. I will choose Grugliasco and sell these two at 4. I think I got this game locked up by a lot. Oh, purple selling 4 cars over there. I shouldn't speak so fast. She got 2 of them already. Green sells another 2. Diarco has no more buyers. I'm out of buyers. Yeah, it doesn't matter what I do. I can't sell. Yeah. Yeah, I know. Purple sells 2 more cars. Purple sells 1 more car, but it's not going to come close. Game is over. 102 to 88 to 70. And this was at normal difficulty. I pretty much easily wrapped it up. It wasn't even close, so maybe I need to make the AI a little harder. Anyway, if you hung in there with me all this time, I applaud you. It's pretty amazing. But that is my solo playthrough of Horseless Carriage. Thank you to Alex for this amazing solo variant. Some more tinkering is in store for sure, and some bug fixes for sure. But that's it. I hope you enjoyed watching this. Hope you learned something. Hope you get turned on to this game, because it is a great game. Yes, it's fiddly a little bit, a lot of moving parts, and you gotta make sure you don't bump the table, but the puzzle in this game is amazing. I'll stop there. It's been a long recording. Thank you for watching, everybody. I hope I didn't miss anything. If I screwed up somewhere along the way, please let me know. Bye-bye.